Welcome to Mormon Book Reviews, where an evangelical encounters the restoration. I'm your host, Steven Pynakker, and I'm very excited, everybody, to introduce to you. This is the very first time that my friend Summur Rayne is going to be my co-host. Now, just a reminder, that does not mean she's replacing Rebecca Bibliotheca. She is just another of my lineup of co-hosts, and I do think that Summur and I were going to do some projects together. And of course, I did that interview with her a couple weeks ago as an introduction. Summur Rayne, welcome to Mormon Book Reviews as our newest co-host.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here and I'm excited for our guest today.
I am too. And folks, of course, any of you who are plugged into this space all know the story of Nick Jones, a gentleman who resigned from the pulpit as a bishop in Mississippi. Nick is arguably probably one of the best known Latter-day Saints in the state of Mississippi. And he made the bold decision to resign from the pulpit. And very fortuitously, he had a family member tape it. He wasn't planning on it. That video went viral. And then just last night, Nick got back from Utah. He taped 2 episodes of Mormon Stories, one-on-one with John, and of course, Nick's lovely wife was there as well. And the next day did a panel with bishops. And then Thursday night, Rebecca helped organize that meetup at the brewery where hundreds of people came to meet Nick. And Nick, I think I want to first of all, I've gotten to be friends with Nick. I've been talking to him on the phone for the last few weeks, kind of helping him navigate this space. It's a tough world that you entered into, okay? And you need friends, and people are going to look out for you. Also, I want to remind you all too, before I get started, is that of course you all know that I am a friend of the restoration. And this is not, I'm not one to go after and try to destroy the church or attack it, but I'll be critical. And I have some of the leading critics of the church come on my program. We all know that. I have a history of that. One day I might have a BYU professor on. The next day I might have Sandra Tanner on or John Dehlin. Okay. That's the space that I've operated in. We're the only neutral Mormon podcast, and we intend to keep it that way. But it's important, like I say all the time, all the voices of the restoration will be heard here. And Nick is an important voice who's just recently arisen. And I want him, because a lot of people, who don't watch Mormon Stories, watch this program. There is audience overlap. There's a lot of you who won't watch Nick because he was on Mormon Stories, but you'll watch him here because this is a different space. And of course, John is a good friend, and I'm glad that Nick was able to go and tell his story. I, of course, have been able to do the same as well. Nick Jones, welcome to the program today, sir.
Thanks, Steven. Thanks for having me. Glad to see you, Summur.
Good to see you too, Nick.
So I wanted just and of course, we hop on Zoom about 15 minutes ago, and you said, Steve, I'm exhausted. I'm actually surprised you decided to hop on this morning. I even gave you the option to maybe wait another day or two, but you really felt that you wanted to come on and talk this morning. And I wanted us to get started. Actually, I just want you to talk about this weekend. It must have been a whirlwind. You had said that last night was the first night you actually got any sleep. It was just nonstop. So tell us, first of all, how do you feel the interviews went? Just kind of get how the meetup went, some of the wonderful people you're able to meet and hear their stories, and then just any other highlights from the weekend that you would like to share with the audience.
Sure. Well, yeah, it's been a whirlwind. We got there on Wednesday evening, stayed with a friend, actually somebody who became my friend since I stepped down as bishop. Since this whole thing went viral, I've had just countless people reach out to me and offer just love. And one man in particular offered me his home for the first 2 nights while I was in Utah, and we've become fast friends. It's quite fun to experience this. He's actually a former bishop / stake president who's left the church about a decade ago, and he's got some incredible stories as well. So that was how the thing started. The next morning, my wife and I got up and went to the Mormon Story studio. And of course, you guys saw the podcast. I actually just watched it for the first time yesterday. I am quite the critic of myself, I've got to say. Hearing my own voice on camera is always somewhat difficult. I don't know if anybody else feels that way, but I was really impressed with my wife. But there are things I may or may not have said that I wished I had or wished I hadn't. But for the most part, I really thought it was a pretty good podcast. And from the comments, and there's quite a lot of comments, majority are quite positive. There's some people who've said some pretty mean things, and I'm not going to respond to those. They hurt. They can keep sending them and they'll still hurt, but that's part of it. If you're going to put yourself out there in this kind of space, you're going to have to recognize that you're going to get beat up sometimes. So I'm expecting that, and I accept it for what it is.
Yeah, that's the key thing, is that that once you entered in this arena, you would become a public person, and that people will criticize you. And
Sure.
I know exactly what that's all about. I had no idea this would become what it's become, but it has, and I'm glad. I'm glad that we're able to have a platform where we can have these adult conversations. So you go and you watched for the first time, you saw the comments, and then of course on Friday you met up with all the different ex-bishops to have like a roundtable discussion. Maybe talk about that experience.
That was a blast.
Okay, good.
I mean,
That was
Bo,
amazing.
yeah, that was all Bo's work. He's brilliant, by the way. He is so keen, so kind, and so accepting of everyone there. You just felt like you belonged instantly with these guys. Jed was the one who surprised me the most. He kind of came in quiet, and then when he opened up in the podcast, it was just like, I love this guy. Yeah. I connected well with him. And then of course Rob has been in the church for a very long time, served as a bishop for 8 years, and then in a stake presidency, so I'm assuming 9 to 10 years. So the dude spent 20 years in church leadership. And to see these people and what they've been through, and how all of our stories, like all of them, were familiar. There was a single one where it wasn't like, oh my gosh, I'm not alone in this. And when you hear that from 3 other bishops who stepped away, you begin to wonder, how many more are there? Of course, I said on John's show, 5 bishops and 2 stake presidents had reached out to me prior to the show. Since then, I've had 4 more bishops write me and basically expressing not concerns, but more like, thank you for doing what I didn't feel like I had the strength to do. I'm not sure that that's the route I'm going to go, but it made me feel like I could do it. Some of these people feel like they, are doing good, so they're going to stay in because they recognize the good they're doing. And look, I can't be mad at them for that at all, because that's where I was for so many months. I was like, hey, I'm doing good though. So I'll take, the hard stuff and put it to the side so we can help people.
Wow. Well, I just wanted to say I've had pastors reach out to me. One is actually somebody I gave his contact information, which I'd like you to get in touch with him, and of course, when the time is appropriate. But he had we had a conversation on the phone. He says, Steve, he said I had to go through academic training as part of my theological training to actually to learn how to do counseling as a pastor. And I said, so he got 12 credit hours of work. And then he says, and 10 years now of being a pastor, and I still feel like I'm in over my head with a lot of this stuff. And he went to me and told me that, he says, Steve, he says, if I'm in a counseling situation and a woman goes to me and says that something about sexual abuse or something about sex, he immediately stops the conversation and he says, okay, I'm going to have a female staffer come in.
Yes.
And we're going to, and he says, you're not obligated to say one more thing about this than you already have. Wow. Okay. He put a stop to it right then and there. This is how professionally trained Christian ministers are to conduct themselves when they're engaging these types of things. I think it's really important that that the church needs to look at ways that they can implement changes to not put people in the position that they put you in. He told me, he says he's in a lose-lose situation what he put himself in. That perhaps we need to institute some reforms on how you have these conversations as bishops, and that's the key thing, is that, for you, you're a construction worker, right? You're a jiu-jitsu fighter. You're a guy, you're a dude, and you're a man's man, by the way. Like, you're one of the most manly men I've ever talked to, by the way. But yet you are not, they just throw you into this as a relatively young person with limited experiences and stuff like that. Throw you into this because essentially a bishop is a pastor of a ward. And so just talk about that. And I imagine that the conversations you have with these other bishops, both who have left, but also who are still in the church, they wouldn't it be great if we could maybe help institute reforms so that we don't have to have these issues anymore with abuse
Well,
claims?
that's the thing. You know, they don't give you hardly any training. They train you how to run tithing. They train you uh, how to run tithing. That's about all they do, honestly, in the church. When you are called to be a bishop, they'll sit down and say, this is going to be very hard. Wives, know that your husbands are going to not be home a lot. This is a sacrifice, but you'll be blessed, you'll be blessed, you'll be blessed. That's all we hear. And then they go, and you're there left to fend for yourself in a lot of ways. Now, of course, they're a phone call away. And if you do have questions, you call the stake president or one of his counselors, and oftentimes they do have an answer for you. But let's go back to this whole pastor that you were speaking of, you know, having somebody come with them into the room to be interviewed. I actually recently, maybe 6 months ago, went into the young women's room while young women's class was going on. And I said, new rule. If you want to meet with me one-on-one as a young woman, that is fine. But I am going to give you the option to pick any one of your choosing. Your mom, your young women's president, your young women's advisor, the counselors in the young women's presidency to sit in with you. Wow. And here's what that does. One, it protects me in a number of ways. Not 100%, but it does add a layer of a shield, or a form of protection, where if a bishop was asking sexual questions, if another adult female was in there, I can near guarantee a bishop would not ask those questions.
Yeah.
That's the problem. So I don't know why we have to have a letter come from the first presidency to tell them to do this, because I did it off of just pure recognizing there's a risk here across the board for everybody, me included, and I do not want that put on me. So I gave them that option. Why can't bishops just do that? I mean, they've been told to use their discernment. Well, you can discern the fact that you shouldn't be meeting with young women, especially dealing with sexual sin, one-on-one, period.
Wow. Summur, I want to bring you into this conversation here. This is, as a woman, how do you feel that would be an important thing? And yeah, that's right. You have the agency, bishops, to actually implement this today and make this a policy in your ward. So that's a great recommendation. Summur, what are your thoughts?
And if I could just,
go ahead.
For you, Summur, I highly doubt the first presidency is going to come and say, stop doing that. Like if they did, that would be extremely bad. So take initiative. Without the problem, everybody's just waiting around to be told what to do. That's a major problem. This is 1984 Orwellian, in my opinion, sitting around waiting for Big Brother to tell us what to do. And we don't need a world that's built off of that. We need to take initiative. We need to have courage. We need to take a stand. And a lot of these bishops are hearing this and they're like, heck yeah, I'm going to do that. So Summur, I'm sorry I interrupted you, but.
Oh, no. I just, and I've said this to you too, Nick, you're amazing. And when we talk about the spirit of discernment, we've discussed a lot about how the church, there's been a lot of instances where there's a lack of, right? But I think when you use common sense, when you have empathy, I believe, for another person, you can say, how would this feel better for them? Like you said, there is a layer of protection for yourself. But what I'm hearing too is, as a woman and as a young woman, when I was growing up, just to have a bishop say that to me would make me feel empowered, right? I may still want to meet with him one-on-one, but I know that if I don't want to, that he's okay with that. And I'm already feeling that empowerment. I think these conversations are so important because we look at something like Sam Young, who was excommunicated for saying we shouldn't have these youth behind closed doors with these bishops one-on-one. But now they've kind of talked about changing that policy somewhat. I will say what I took from your conversation with the other bishops that I'd never known is that those specific questions, those sexual questions, are not supposed to be, they're not in the handbook as ask them this way, right? I was very lucky growing up with my bishop roulette where I never had a bishop get too into certain questions. I also didn't have certain issues growing up, so I don't know if that's why they didn't lead into those questions. But the fact that I was hearing as I got older that specific questions, even when youth would say, no, I don't have a problem with that, they would go even more into it to kind of get those answers that are just not appropriate for a grown man to be asking youth. It was interesting to hear from a bishop's perspective that that's not even told. You guys are not counseled to ask those specific things. So this is just something that we've kind of accepted within our culture, which should not be accepted, if that makes sense. So I'm grateful that you've kind of spoken out about that and saying this is not in the handbook. We are not told to ask these specific questions because I do think too, there's a habit, right? When you grow up in the church, there are certain questions that are asked of you as a youth. As you get older and you get married, there's certain questions that are asked. So when you become a bishop, maybe you think that's what's supposed to be asked. But when a bishop comes out, or a few bishops like you guys in their panel, and say, no, guys, this isn't in the handbook. This is bad policy. We shouldn't be doing this. I think there are good bishops and good stake presidents out there that are going to look at that and say, wait, where did this come from? And I'm going to put a stop to it on my local level right now. So I just want to thank you for that, for speaking on that specifically, but also saying you can tell a young woman or a young man, if you guys, especially young women though, if you'd like somebody else to be in the room with you when you come speak with me, that is not a problem. And it's the person of your choosing. It doesn't have to be the young women president. It doesn't have to be your mother. You can pick who you'd like to come in to make you feel safe.
Absolutely. At least give that option without
At
question.
least the option.
Here's
Absolutely.
another thing. I have a family member who went to the bishop for some sexual sin, and it turns out she was actually raped.
Wow.
Years later, oftentimes you don't know. You find yourself in a situation, you might be partying, might be a little drunk, might be tipsy, and all of a sudden you think you put yourself in that situation when you didn't at all. And a bishop will label you as somebody who's a sinner.
Yeah.
The first question every bishop should ask is, were you raped?
Yeah.
Period. Not who was it or how many details. No, were you raped? Were you abused? And if you were, let's call the authorities and let's make this thing a big freaking deal. Two,
Yes.
and I said this on John's on Mormon Stories, is are you pregnant? Because that does affect, if it's a child, someone who's under the age of 18, we need to help them because those are massive decisions that have to be made in a very short amount of time. And none of those are in the handbook.
Yeah.
Mm.
It just, yeah,
It's
I get
it's
frustrated.
it's frustrating. And if I could just say really fast, I on my Mormon discussions when I was on that with RFM and Bill Reel, I had told them that I had a friend of mine that was when I worked for the Philadelphia Eagles, he not transferred, he had been picked up by another team, and we stayed friends. And he got tipsy one night. Long story short, he tried to sexually assault me. I was able to fight him off, but later on, this is probably 5, 6 years later, when I decided I wanted to kind of get back into becoming active, I sat down with a bishop in the New Jersey ward and told him just everything that I'd done, but I'd mentioned that this happened.
Yeah.
And he had recommended disciplinary counsel for me. At the time, I didn't know what that even meant. I still to this day don't know why, but there was a layer there of what you could have done to prevent this from happening to you. Summer. I ended up going to another ward months later. I was a flight attendant, so I kind of was in and out. And I ended up going to a different ward and I spoke to that bishop. And he looked at me and said, I have no idea why that bishop would want to put you through disciplinary council. You've been through enough. And he said, there's nothing, you don't need a miss sacrament. He said, you've done nothing wrong. And I remember in that moment just crying because it was I didn't even realize what I was holding. But in that moment, it was someone of authority telling me this was not your fault. You are not in the wrong. But like you said, there's nothing in the handbook, but unfortunately, there is a lot of teachings or, again, a lot of habit where depending on who you have, they'll say, even if you're raped, what did you do? Where did you put yourself in that situation? And you're the sinner. And it's a lot. It's a lot to put on a person who's already been through a traumatic experience to say we're going to add to that trauma because the Lord needs you to do more. I don't know, but um, it's that's something I'd like to see change within the church. Like you said, certain questions off the bat: were you coerced? Were you raped? Are you pregnant? Because those are things that are immediate, and it will help the person who's talking to them know what steps to go to. But I also think, Nick, that some kind of training beforehand would really help because eh, I just can't imagine construction worker, plumber. My husband's a doctor. You go into these situations, these positions, and you just don't know.
Don't
You
know.
don't know, and you have
And
that.
on
Also,
this,
you're being told. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
you're banking on the spirit of discernment. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but that's all you
That's what I was
got.
gonna say. That's
And
what I
it's
was
like,
gonna say.
how, you know, how can I be guaranteed that I'm doing the right thing when I don't know what the heck I'm doing half the time? I'm guessing. But the problem is my guess is like church doctrine to the person I'm talking to because it comes from a,
Exactly.
and so it's like that's the answer when I'm sitting here going home thinking, oh God, I hope I told them the right thing because they're running with it and I'm
Yep.
uncertain. You
Yep.
know, I interrupted
Yeah.
you. I'm so sorry.
No, that's exactly what I was going to say. I was going to say that as little training as you get, there's also the extra pressure on you to be told, but God wants you in this position, right? So there, you're already thinking, I'm supposed to be here because God wants me here, but I don't know what I'm doing. So it's just a very it's a lose-lose for everybody, I think, involved. Because there's a lot of guesswork. I mean, you guys are the first ones people call when they're having marriage issues, when anything happens, and you just don't know. You're trying, and I'm grateful that Mississippi had a wonderful bishop like you because you really worked on a human level. So again, I think this episode's gonna be a lot of me saying thank you for being who you are, but as a member of the church, I just know being able to go to your leader and know that they love you, truly love you, that it's not about what's the doctrine, what's the handbook, what does it's the spirit of the law, not the letter of the law. It goes so far.
Yeah,
So
I
yeah.
agree. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. And actually, I do appreciate your voice, Summur. You're an important voice that needs to be heard in this. And that's why I want you to have you as a co-host, because it's really important to get the perspective of somebody who's in your nuanced position that you're in and everything like that. And by the way, folks, I do want to let everybody know that, yes, that is a Pirates of the Caribbean poster behind
Yes.
her. And she is currently at Disneyland with her kids, and they're in the other room.
Yes.
And so this is what we do. And I love your dedication,
We
Summur. I
do.
really do appreciate it. And I do think that, that's important that we have this conversation because, like you said, you've heard from many bishops who are currently serving, and they're reaching out to you and telling you similar stories. Now, I'm friends with many bishops. I'm friends with the stake president here locally and the bishop, and so I think it's really important that we, because basically bishops are pastors. And honestly, do you think, Nick? I have a question for you. Do you think that maybe, in addition to implementing some of the reforms that you did, do you perhaps, I wonder if there should be some kind of program available or something where they could go get some training on counseling. That might be another thing too.
So I love that question. I'm so glad you brought it up because I wanted to segue into that. It baffles me that the church has the funds that it has and the resources. It has infinite resources, right? You name it. If it's a surgeon, a doctor, a lawyer, and they're members of the church, and if the church asked them to give of their time freely, they would do it,
Hmm.
right? Why are bishops not given monthly, like mandatory therapy sessions
Yeah.
by people who are not members, where they can share these confidences and work through them rather than take them home and take them out on their wife and children?
Yeah.
Because look, I'm not an abusive man. I'm not any of those things. I have a great relationship with my wife and children. But the heavy days as a bishop, I came home and they knew. They're like, oh man, we're just going to leave dad alone today because he had a day. And it would come out, but it would come out in a negative way towards my family. You know,
Yeah.
that's not okay. And to do that to them for 5, 10 years, 15 years, because most of these guys, they're bishops. And then when they're in their 5th year of bishop, a new state president's going to be called, and it's going to be that guy. So he doesn't even get a break from all the garbage. And so they, you know, 15, 20 years of their life, they're an angry dad. Why can't we offer them a mandatory therapy session? That would have, I bet you I could have made it another 2 years if I would have had that.
Okay. Well, that's really a great insight there. I appreciate that. And again, these are human beings, and
Gosh, yeah.
they're going through this. These are challenging things that they have to deal with, and they're not afforded the tools to be able to even be able to. They need help themselves, you know, and they need therapy themselves, and they have to be then a therapist and a pastor, a therapist, a counselor, all these things. And I just, my heart goes out to these men that have to do this, and especially the men who have good hearts and and really want to help people. And you're one of those people who wants to do that, and how it weighs on you. You know, it just, I never really thought of it from that perspective until I heard your story. And I think it's really important that faithful members hear this story as well. You know, these bishops are doing a lot. It's a lot of heavy, and of course the bishops' wives. Let's include them in this too. They're carrying the burden too. Maybe speak to that.
That's hard for me. Because I married somebody, and you've started to understand who Amanda is. She's just a gem. So she would never like, she would always be patient on those days. She'd recognize that I was hurting. So she would never like lash out at me and be like, I hate this bishop thing. She was always faithful, saying, well, we're just doing what the Lord has asked us to do, but this is really hard on the family. They're the unsung hero in all of these. The wives of these leaders, they deal with way more than you can imagine. And they get zero attention, zero recognition for it. It's made us stronger in some ways because we've been through hell and back together. But a good portion of that was just completely unnecessary. We would have been just fine or better off without it. So these wives of church leaders, they need a voice. You should put them on a platform. I think we need more women to speak up. I think we need more women of church leadership to speak up, and they don't need to be ex-Mormon. You know, I hate to even be in that category. I'm not an ex-Mormon. I'm not a Mormon. I'm just a person trying to do the right thing. And I don't know if you saw, I posted on TikTok yesterday. I apologized to Cardin Ellis because I said I wanted to put him in a chokehold because he had says some pretty nasty things about me, and I couldn't even watch them all. I just turned it off. You know, I'm not going to feed into that. I'm already under a lot of stress right now with all of this. I don't need an added, but I really wish that people like that would sit down and have a decent conversation with me rather than just, try to hurt me. But then I went back and said, I'd like to put him in a chokehold. I didn't know he was suffering from leukemia. That made my heart hurt for him, and I just, and someone said that he had reached out to me and maybe he has. Y'all, I can't tell you how many messages I can't get to.
Oh, I can't even imagine.
But maybe he has written me and I haven't been able to get to it yet. But so far I have not heard. But surely there's ways that he could get to me if he wanted to.
Yeah. Actually, I have called their. I'm in touch with their producer. They love me over.
I could have called you, called John, who has my contact, and called me directly, but I haven't heard from them. Okay. But I'm saying that's bad. I'd love to sit down and talk with them. I really would.
Okay, I'll pass that along.
I mean, I will say sometimes people do need a little bit of a chokehold, though, just a little bit, and then we're good. Just so don't beat yourself up too bad. Sometimes a little chokehold isn't too bad.
Yeah. Feels scary.
Yeah.
Oh, Phil's character. I love it. Yeah. Oh, that's
Phil's
great.
character.
Yeah. No, and I think it's important that we, because the other thing that happened this weekend was, of course, you had that meetup, and of course, Summur, you were there, and you got to
Yes.
meet Nick. And the thing the like you going to Utah, your world is completely changed now. Once you go on Mormon Stories, your world will never be the same, right? And but you also got to engage people at that meetup that was organized by Rebecca, and you heard their stories, and you realized then and there, like, whoa, like there's this is what I'm doing is having this amazing impact on people and is helping people maybe process trauma. You got to hear their stories. Maybe speak to that, your experience of just kind of, I imagine it was overwhelming to you.
Overwhelming. Well, first and foremost, I'd like to say thank you to Rebecca. I know I said it there, but
Yeah.
it was really a fun setting. I was overwhelmed though. We had just, leading up to this thing, we were so nervous and our anxiety was so high. We weren't sleeping well. And then you're sleeping in someone else's bed that night, so you don't sleep good
Yeah.
anywhere that's not. And so we're tired, and here we are at this, at this get together at the Bewildered, what was it called, brewery, which was
Brewery.
a spot. But y'all, I thought I'd just walk in there and it'd just be just some camaraderie. But then this line started to form, and I just kept looking like, oh my goodness, it's not ending. And it was, and I don't want this to be taken the wrong way, but it was so beautiful for people to come and say, oh, you've done this great thing. Yo, I don't feel that way. I just feel like I opened my mouth and said what I felt was right. And for some reason that makes people think that people are heroes for doing the right thing when they're already doing the right thing in their life. So
Yeah.
I'm no different than them. But it became a little overwhelming because it was, you've done this great thing. Well, thank you very much. And then they tell their story.
Yeah.
And some of those stories were extremely hard to hear, just like the ones that have been written to me. I mean, they went from abuse to family just completely disowning them. There were some other things I probably ought not say on here that were pretty graphic.
Yeah.
But the outpouring of love was almost more than I can handle, to be quite honest. It was overwhelming. So, and we went to bed that night, got about 3 hours of sleep, and got up and did the other podcast. I had a cup of coffee because I don't drink caffeine. I hadn't had caffeine in 4 years, y'all. And I drank a cup of coffee because I wasn't going to make it through the bishop's forum without it. So
Yeah.
Okay.
thank God for coffee.
Oh,
Yeah.
and by the way, did you have a beer while you were at the brewery?
I tasted somebody's beer. I had never had a beer before, and somebody brought me an IPA beer, and I sipped on it. I just tasted it. I've got to tell you, it wasn't the best taste for me, but
Yes.
I actually have had a beer since, actually 2 beers since, and I can see how people like the taste. Also, someone brought me a mixed drink, and I drank just a little of that, and it tasted actually a lot better than the beer. It was
Yeah.
sweeter, something sweeter. But I didn't even finish that because I couldn't, the people just kept coming and coming and coming. So I couldn't drink it. So I ended up putting it down, and I looked up and somebody drank it. I don't know who drank it, but it was gone.
It's probably
So,
Rebecca.
Yeah.
So, oh, that's great. Well, I think it's really important because, like, you are in this process. So here I am talking to you on the phone a few weeks ago as you're basically your world is like upside down. You're telling us that
Mhm.
you were processing trauma. You're sometimes in the fetal position. Just you're in the middle of this. You're still dealing with this, and it has to be a whirlwind. Just talk. You had mentioned about the mandatory counseling for bishops. What about you? What kind of counseling and therapy are you going to get? Because you're going to need that too.
I've been to see a guy locally. I have a good friend who sees a counselor every Friday, and he actually said, "Hey, I want you to come to my counseling session with me with my counselor." We sat down for about 2 hours, and it was amazing just talking. And I'll tell you, the counselor talked probably as much as I did. It was almost like I was helping him as much as he was helping me.
Wow.
It was powerful. I've got a dear friend of mine who is actually a counselor, and I reached out to him and said, "Look, I need your help." This was actually in Utah. I called him 2 nights ago. I said, "I'm burning out. I don't know how to separate all of this. I'm trying to deconstruct Mormonism on one hand. I'm trying to run two businesses on another hand, and I'm trying to be a dad and still put on a face that everything's okay.
Yeah.
When like right now, like, you know, I'm being charismatic because I'm on camera. But when I leave here, my demeanor is going to change drastically because I'm heartbroken to learn that the narrative that I've been raised in for 40 years has been a deception.
Yeah.
And it's everything to me. I was giving my whole life to the organization of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. My money, my time, everything I had to offer. I was planning to turn it all over to that and to turn my life over to them. And not only turn it over, but to use my funds to do it.
Yeah.
And now I look and I realize, oh my gosh, Sundays are a beautiful day to spend with my family, like really spend with my family, not the Mormon way, but the new way, which is powerful. My evenings now aren't consisting of being at the church on Wednesdays or Tuesdays or Saturdays or even Sundays, because oftentimes it's 4 days a week where you've got between stake and word activities. You're full.
Yeah.
I am more present now than I've ever been because I stepped away from the church.
Interesting. You know, it's funny, it's interesting, Nick, you know, because in Summur, I want you to chime in here too, but I was an atheist for like 12 years, and I suffered abuse, spiritual abuse and religious abuse in the evangelical world. Okay. And I understood why. I tell people I was an atheist for 12 years because I understand, and I tell people, I go to some of the top atheists, I've had them on my program, and say, I'm a pro-atheist evangelical. And they're like, what do you mean? I say, well, sometimes people have been so traumatized by religion that they almost have to become atheists because even the concept of God triggers them. And so I think we need to all be sensitive to where everybody's at in their journey. Okay.
Yeah.
And love them where they're at, and don't judge them, but be there for them. Be their friend, whether you're in or out of the church. You know, I felt abandoned as well. Okay. And the process of, I tell people that you don't understand, and I'm not saying that you're an atheist, but I think, but a lot of people head that direction, and I understand why a lot of ex-Mormons become atheists. But when you become an atheist, it's actually sad because you've lost your best friend. And then that's a devastating thing too. So I understand what it's like to be right in the middle of the process that you're going in. I went through like a dark decade of the soul. I didn't have a community. Now I do. You are building a community. I just think that we have to be sensitive to people that, look, don't hate on Nick because he left the church. Try to understand why he left, because guess what? You faithful members out there, you have family and friends that have left. You have people that you thought were, you know, TBM all the way, and next thing you know, they walk away. And you need to be able to understand where these people are coming from and develop some empathy so that you can at least try to understand where they're at and be their friend no matter what. What do you say to that, Nick?
Well, I would add, I hate the fact that we have to put labels on it. Why do we have to be an atheist? Why do we have to be a Mormon? Why do we have to be agnostic? Why can't we just be? People ask me all the time, well, what's your political perspective? I've never voted, never once. You want to know why? Because I don't agree with either of them. And because I don't feel like I agree with them, I don't have to pick a side. I don't have to pick a label. I just don't have to. So am I a Mormon? Yeah. Am I an atheist? Yeah. But I'm none of those things. I'm Nick Jones. And it doesn't take having a label to love people.
Amen.
Simple as that.
I love it. Summur, what do you think?
I think that it's just important to recognize that people are nuanced. And I do think that something that organized religion, no matter what faith it is, I do think that a lot of them, especially the ones that are high demand, takes away the humanity of nuanced individuals. like you're saying, Nick, that why does there have to be a label, right? It's you're either Mormon, LDS, or post-Mormon, ex-LDS. No, I'm Summur Rayne, you're Nick. It's there has to be a level of we have an identity outside of organizations, whether that's political, whether that's religious. I think that as humans, we crave identity, right? We crave the ability, we crave community. So when you find a community, say a religious community, you say, okay, this is who I am. But there has to be something more than that. I think we need to rise above that, to be completely honest. I had a friend, or have a friend, who I grew up with in Pennsylvania, and she was a very strong LDS. She had a blog, everything. And I remember she called me 2 years ago and said, I've left the church. And at the time, I was completely active, TBM, everything. And um, I listened for about 3 hours to what she'd heard. She read the saints and the essays and just listened for 3 hours. And then asked about her kids, and we just talked about other things. I didn't realize until about 6 months ago, she told me, Summer, you were the only friend who did that. Everybody else, either they stopped talking to me completely, or they try to get me back in the church. And I just couldn't understand that, because I
Yeah.
didn't become her friend because she was LDS. I don't become your friend because of who you voted for last election. So if I find out that you voted for someone that I don't like, or
Yeah.
you're no longer part of this religion,
Mm-hmm.
are we no longer friends? I just, it's very difficult for me to understand that. And so I think that it's important to, again, not really base our friendships and relationships on what the other person believes, but who they are. Nick, I think you're just awesome. Amanda is amazing. So to me, I wouldn't even what care if you were LDS, if you're evangelist, if you're Baptist, if you're Republican, it wouldn't matter, because we
Right.
we connect on a different level on who we are. And then the other stuff is just, cherry on top.
Yep.
And sometimes there's just no cherry, but we still have the base, right? And so I just think as humans, especially in this community, I've mentioned this before, but my husband is a active believing member. I still attend church, um, but I no longer believe the truth claims. So that's my journey, right? And I feel like we all need to give each other space to
Yeah.
figure out where we are, because we're all on this journey, and it's okay not to know.
Yeah.
That's where I am. I know? I don't know. And so Nick, I just really appreciate that that's where you are, where you're saying, and I told you this in person, but you're doing what a lot of people do behind closed doors. You're doing that publicly. And I
Yeah.
really appreciate that, because you have had the choice to say, I'm not going to speak about this. I'm going to take down everything. But you did the opposite, right? You said, I will talk with John. I will do a TikTok. And I appreciate that you've allowed us into your life while you go through this, because a lot of us are doing this behind closed doors and we don't realize that there are more of us that are doing this. So
Yeah.
again, thank you. Another
Sure.
thank you to you. But yeah, I
Welcome.
appreciate that.
I think labels divide. I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure that's what they do. They separate.
Mhm.
When we put labels on things, like let's say LGBTQ, that's a label. Well, what does
Yeah.
it do? It separates them
Mhm.
as
Yeah.
different.
Yeah.
And then we say straight, gay, those are separations. Why
Yeah.
can't we just be? Why can't we accept them for who they are? I had the most amazing conversation with a young kid who's my sister-in-law's nephew the other night. He's just kind of a weird, quirky kid, got piercings, this and that. I shook his hand. I said, I want to learn about you. That's what I told him. And it elated him. Like he's
Mhm.
like, this guy,
Wow.
this muscle-headed, you know, guy that just made John Dehlin's podcast wants to learn about me.
Mhm.
And I came to find out
Wow.
a day later that it did incredible things for him. He wanted to know how to talk to a girl. He was scared. He's 21 years old. I don't know how to talk to.
Wow.
And I've got this philosophy: be a caveman, but be a samurai. Be have a code, but have no fear. Just go in there and swing, because you'll never know unless you
Yeah,
swing. And
absolutely.
I tell you, he was elated. So quit putting labels on people, because they
Amen.
always
Mhm.
quit calling it anything. Because if we didn't have an LGBTQ community, or a very strong, very Orthodox Mormon group, you wouldn't have it.
Hmm. Yeah,
You would just simply have people trying to figure out who the flip they are.
yeah.
Great point, Nick. And I have to say that I feel like so often the people fall into this trap in the ex-Mormon community. And look, I've actually posted on I go on Reddit and I post stuff. As a matter of fact, I've solicited questions for this interview on Reddit, and a few people I might address some of those as well. And I want to thank you for those of you who did submit some questions for Nick and some reactions to him. But I find that I go scroll through Reddit and people will say something like, I could never be a friend with somebody who voted for Trump. And I'm just like, you literally are cutting yourself off from half of America when you do that. And you know what you're doing
Yeah.
is you literally are creating your own orthodoxy, your own religion, you have your heresy hunters, you have your inquisitions, you people have to fit in a certain box. If you are not of a particular persuasion, you are not welcome in this group, you are canceled. And
Yeah.
it has all the trappings of organized religion. And I feel that that community needs to realize that they have to be open to people from different perspectives. I literally been effectively banned from some of the Reddits because I would dare platform somebody who's slightly right of center. Oh my gosh, you're platforming this person. It's like, yeah, and you know what? I'm going to keep platforming them. You tell me how to do my show. I'm just bringing those people back. Okay, that's how I operate. I'm not going to allow outsiders to come and tell me what to do. You're the same way. You're cut out the same way. You're an individual, Nick. You're not going to fit into any orthodoxy. You're your own person. And I tell people, God told me when I first started this channel, He said, just remember that everybody is an image bearer, and that those of you who
Hmm.
disagree with you, just remind yourself, Steve, that that's an image bearer you're dealing with. So even though I have 90% of the guests on my program, you could argue I disagree with, just by the fact that I'm an evangelical Christian, and disagree with them theologically, maybe disagree with them politically. But I also have to remember their
Yeah.
humanity, and that they are created in His image, and that we're all image bearers, and to look at it that way. And once you do that, it takes the blinders down, and you see a whole nother side of humanity, and you can actually experience the full divinity of us, because you're not cutting yourself from other people, but you can find that you can learn from them, and they can teach you things. The evangelicals go to me and say, are you going to those Mormons and setting them straight? And I said, no, I'm learning from them. They bless me, I bless them. Ex-Mormons, they bless me, I bless them. Atheists, same thing. Christians, same thing. Okay,
Yeah.
that's the important thing, is to have that position. I'm so sick and tired of us having to be in certain labels, certain rules. You got to be in this box, and I want to blow the whole thing up. What do you think? What do you say to that, Nick?
Well, can I say that? I want to blow it up too. I really do. It's just ridiculous. Here's what gets me ticking is there are no absolutes. And if somebody is claiming absolutism, I'm running away.
Yeah.
When they say we're the only true and living church on the face of the earth, which is Doctrine and Covenants section 1, I'm out. Because
Yeah.
I've lived in the South. I'm surrounded by some of the most God-fearing, faith-loving, Jesus-promoting people on planet Earth. And they are some of the best, most salt of the earth people you'll ever. And they live good, flipping lives. Like,
Yeah.
their moral compass is intact. And I ignored them for 20 years because I thought I had something absolute that they did not have. And that's why I struggle with religion now, because if I go to the Baptist church, whom my dear friend is the pastor of, I'm going to be a critic of him from a Mormon perspective. There's no way I can't be, because of how entrenched I have been in Mormonism. And so I can't go to church for that reason, because I will only approach it with a negative, how are they wrong versus what I know.
Right.
But I'll tell you what changed for me was and it changed at home last November, have zero expectations in life. Trade your expectations for appreciation and your world will change in an instant. Appreciate everything in front of you, the good, the bad, the ugly, and don't expect it to be anything other than what it just is in that moment. And watch how stress levels will just completely almost disappear, because you accept everything for what they are. You don't
Yeah.
stress over it. You're not up all night worrying about this, that, and the other. You're say, okay, well, that's happened. The universe is going to work with that, and it's
Yep.
going to teach them. So let it. I don't need to be yelling, Mormonism is a lie. I don't.
Right.
All they have to do is look and say, man, Nick's happy. He's not miserable. He's not paying his tithing, and he's making more money now than he ever has. What? That's not possible. And then they start looking and saying, huh, this narrative is not lining up.
Right.
You know, that's how you do this. You don't have to scream it from the pulpit or from the rooftops. You don't have to have a King Benjamin moment. You can just simply be without expectation.
I love that.
No,
I love that.
Yeah, and I think that's important that, we recognize that for people who have transitioned out of organized religion, and for me, I was transitioned out of it for a very long time too, is that they often will chuck believing in God altogether and become totally materialistic in their worldview. And I tell people, I said, you need to understand that we are spiritually hardwired animals. We are hardwired for spirituality and religion. It is what got us here. It gave us an evolutionary advantage over all of our other related human groups from the humans, that the Homo sapiens made it because we developed funeral practices, religious rites, recognized that we were just more than just meat when we died. We'd also see, Margaret Mead said that the moment we became human was when we see remains of people with healed, broken hip bones. In other words, the community carried that person and took care of them. And then they started doing burial rites, recognizing, oh, there's more to this than just there's something bigger than us. So and now let's bury things with them that maybe help them in the afterlife, or maybe things that were important to them. And we have funeral ceremonies. And so this was part of our evolutionary growth as a species, is that believing in a spiritual something bigger than ourselves. And when people abandon that, they are actually turning their back on the very people, our ancestors, that got us here. It's what made us survive as a species. So I want to say that I like the fact, Nick, that you still are plugged into spiritual mindedness things as well. Because I'm not saying, look, if you need to be an atheist, I get it, because maybe religion did a lot of harm to you. That's fair too. But don't just throw the baby out with the bathwater when it comes to having a spiritual walk as well.
No, I've experienced too much within the walls of even Mormonism spiritually to walk away from it. I can see how people get angry, and out of their anger, they don't know what to turn to, so they turn to atheism or agnosticism. And I can understand that completely. So I don't judge those people at all. Am I there? Again, I'm not going to put a label on that, because I'm not there, but I'm not some believer in, the Christian narrative 100% anymore. I don't know where I am. This is all new for me.
Right.
I'm trying to figure that out in the very moment. That's why I'm doing this, just so you know. We're quite private people for the most part. I know my wife has an Instagram where she showed us building our home because she wanted to just show off what she was doing, and I have no qualms with that. But I personally don't think I made a Facebook post in the last 4 years until a few weeks ago. I added Anthony Miller's TED Talk, which, if you haven't heard
Amazing.
it, unbelievable.
Amazing.
I'm a friend of mine on a Marco Polo chat with a group of guys, and I'll tell you, he's incredible. And I think maybe you've had him on your show, Steve, and if you haven't, you should. He's great. But we've been private. My Instagram, I haven't made a post on Instagram in years, 7-8 years. So when this all came out and my brother posted it to Reddit, it was overwhelming, the responses. And it was like, you have this voice, be this voice for me. And then it's like, okay, well, I have this thing given to me. Well, you've got to do it. And it's not that I want to, but I also want people to see that this deconstruction, I want them to see the real thing. And maybe they can turn to this as a reference to say, oh, I felt that, I felt that, I felt that. And he made it out of that. So I don't have to blow my brains out. I don't have to quit. I don't have to leave my wife and kids because I don't know what to turn to. Nick did it. No one's recorded their deconstruction. No one's been public as they've been deconstructing. So my wife and I feel like, hey, this could be something that could help these people. And I'll tell you, I have so many people write me saying, I'm out a month. One of the ladies at the bar the other night, 2 months, she was, I feel so bad for her.
Wow.
She's so struggling. Her husband's in. Their marriage is in turmoil. She doesn't know what to do. She asked me, heck if I know, you know,
Yeah.
I don't want to be that guy again. I don't have that discernment, right? I just said,
Yeah.
just, I don't know what to tell you, except I'm sorry you're dealing with this. It sucks. You know, have that Brene Brown empathy. Hey, I'm here. I'm in the trenches with you. That's the only thing I can do to help this person, because there's no answer, because each person is different. But knowing someone's in the trenches with you is really the answer. It's the answer. There are people with me. You don't even need to talk to them. You just need to know they're with you.
Amen. Yeah, that's one of the things too, because again, I've had similar experiences as well. A lot of people who maybe have transitioned out of the church who don't know what they believe anymore, and whether they don't even know if they can believe there's a God, but they go to me and say, "You give me hope that I could find a way back into faith in God based on my story and my journey that I took as well." And I think that's really important. And the other thing I do too is when I talk to people, I always look, I let them sit, I listen to what they have to say. And I always try to impart positive messages to them and also say, look, I love you. I care about you. There is a community out there, and thank you for telling me your story. I mean, we've had similar experiences, just with emails and all this kind of stuff. And it's going on for a couple of years now of dealing. I was telling you guys off camera that last weekend or the weekend before, I was talking down somebody who was basically saying, I'm about to commit suicide. And I had to talk him down. And this person, he's a Latter-day Saint. And so this, look, folks, you don't realize that what goes on in the camera is only the tip of the iceberg. The reality
Yeah.
is that this is a ministry for people who've been hurt. And I don't go after the church. I go after evangelicals more than I do the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, because there are serious issues in our movement as well. And I don't think we have any right to go and to bash the Latter-day Saint church when our movement is a mess as well. But to realize, Nick, you had those hundreds of people there, and they had that long line, and the effect, and then all the emails you're getting. I mean, this is real. People's lives are at stake, and people, like you said, most people are deconstructing, but they're alone by themselves,
Yeah.
not knowing where to turn. They're listening to this conversation, and this is what's giving them hope. And I think that's what the key thing is we gotta help people who are hurting. That's the key thing. And let them know that there is a community for them.
Yeah, I alluded
Absolutely.
to that in John's podcast. You know, it's like you're trying to swim in 3 feet of water, and you think that you're in 10 or 12 feet of water, but you're in 3 feet of water. That's what it's like deconstructing. You're
Yeah.
waiting, waiting, and waiting, and you get exhausted, and finally you just want to drown and turn it off. For me, I'm not suicidal. When I said that I have had suicidal thoughts, it's not suicide that I want. I don't want to end my life. It's not that
Right.
at all. I need to turn the switch off.
Right.
That's all I need. I need Joseph Smith to leave me alone. I need
Yeah.
Brigham Young to leave me alone. I need Russell Nelson to leave me alone just for a second, so I can
Yeah.
function as a dad or as a business person. And when you're so overwhelmed with that part of what you're deconstructing, all you can think is, if I end it, it'll stop, because nothing else is working.
Yeah.
And Summur, I know you've been through this.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
It's something I don't wish on anybody, because I mean, there's a reason why they say deconstructing, right? Because you are literally taking apart everything. And I'm the same way, Nick, where I don't judge people who get angry or go into nihilism, or because I understand it. I understand it. I just know for myself, um, like you just said, I've had too many spiritual experiences to say there's nothing.
Yeah.
I'm just okay with saying I don't know what that is, but I know there's something there. Whether you want to call it the universe, whether you want to call it Heavenly Father, Heavenly Mother, it doesn't matter. I know there's something there. And I heard someone say the other day, um, I don't remember who it was, but they said they feel as though organized religion co-ops our divinity, right? So our connection with whatever that is, our connection to be able to make things happen, to be able to tap into something higher than us, organized religion comes in and says, we're going to take that away and get in between it. And we're going to say it's us.
Yeah.
And I feel as though that's what happens is when you deconstruct and you learn that there are things that are a lie, you start to question everything and say, wait, was that even real? Did I feel that impression? Did I feel that? And the answer is yes. Yes, it's still there. Um, it's just there was somebody there that tried to say that they were responsible for it, but you don't need them. You have a direct connection. And so that's what I would like to tell people is you feel like you're drowning, but who you were before, you're still that person. It was just somebody there that tried to tell you they were responsible for you and your growth. But it was always you. It was
Oh,
always you.
yeah.
Um, and something else I want to say was I mentioned this on the other podcast with Steve is I always think there's a quote when I was growing up, there by the grace of God go I. And I try to remember that is where I am right now is only through the experiences that I've experienced, the family that I was raised in, the environment that I have, the marriage that I have. But the person that I'm judging or the person that I see over there that I could say, I don't understand why they're doing that or who they are, I could be that person if my
Yeah.
circumstances were different, if I was born in a different country. So I try to remember that also is we are literally all going through this thing called life. We are all doing it and we're trying to do it the best we can. There is no handbook. And so we just have to be just patient and kind and gentle and understand everyone has their own journey and
Yeah.
just be there for them. Try to be that safe space for other people. And that's where the fulfilling, right? The fulfillment of who we are comes from is knowing that we're helping other people. And I feel like that's why you're doing what you're doing. It's not even really for yourself. It's just to say, know that I am going through this and it is painful.
Yeah.
I would rather not. I mean, I think that's a big thing too, right? That we're taught is if you leave the church is because you want to sin or you didn't want to believe or you didn't have enough spiritual experiences. No, I want to believe that this was true. I wanted to believe that there was a bottom to this, right? And when you realize that there isn't, you got to go through life and you got to figure it out and you just got to rely on each other.
Yeah. You know, Steve, were you going to say something? You put your hand up. Not that I'm
Nope.
trying to run your podcast.
Nope.
Yes.
Well, you know, one of the things, and I don't regret it at all, but I raised my hand in John's podcast, right? About
Yes.
masturbation. Can we
Yes.
talk about that here? Is that possible?
Yeah.
Steve, I'm not
Yes.
crossing
Yeah.
bounds.
Mhm.
You know, it's such a sad thing that people can't just be honest and they shame themselves, which just totally is terrible for your development. We need to be open. I sat with 4 bishops the other day. Every one of them were like, yeah, that happened. What are the odds? 4 in one room, all the same story. You know what I mean? And I don't want to make them mad by saying this, but you know, everybody has probably done it. Maybe there's a slim few, but the fact that you feel like you have to hide it, it needs to be talked about. It needs to be addressed because it's not healthy. It's just not healthy. And the other thing I was going to say is, and I talked about this, I can't remember which one because it's all a blur to me. I haven't watched the second one yet. I've only watched the first one. I haven't watched the Bishop Forum, but the word enmeshment, which most of you probably know what it is. I have an example. There's a sister in the ward which is just hounding us. The church is true. What have you done? This is terrible. And then I just got a message from her saying, is it true? I don't know anymore.
Mm.
Wow.
So what I've learned with this particular situation is her testimony was so deeply enmeshed in who I was to her as her bishop
Yeah.
that to see me fall was to see a part of her belief fall.
Yeah.
And that's what hurts so bad in this area right now, to see me and my wife step down and to get a tattoo on our hand, or Amanda got a few others, or to see us with a beer in our hand, because they're like, that's part of me. And now it's bad. And the reality is it's not bad. It's just us having human experience. and we're not being irresponsible. We're not doing bad things. We just are experiencing what it's like to be human. We need more of that, because if we just chalk things up, and I think there are barriers where we have to draw a line, right? But when it comes to this kind of, you're experiencing it. Where you draw the line is when it involves stealing or removing someone else's agency.
Yes.
If you choose on your own to do something, fine. But when you choose to control, manipulate, or put power or dominion over another individual, I'm out. I'm not interested. And that, to me, is what's wrong with the world.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm that's
Wow.
fair to look at it from just the macro sense, the overview
And
of
if
all.
you see it differently, I'd love to hear. This is just
Oh,
my perspective,
well,
from
well, I think it's important that your story be told. And now, not everybody is going to agree with what you say, but that's fine too. I think you're bringing an important aspect and to the conversation, a different, looking at things through a different lens. And also just the reason I had you on is I want people who normally don't watch Mormon stories to hear this perspective. I tell people I'm going to challenge your faith, but I'm not trying to challenge it to undermine it. I'm challenging it to strengthen it. And that's part of it. And having a healthy faith is something that you don't close yourself off from certain ideas and certain views, but you're open to all. And you want to hear their story. And that can inform your faith, whether you're in the church or out of the church. I think it's really important for people to have open minds and hear all the different perspectives and use that as information that informs them and not look at you as a threat. There are people who think that you are basically possessed by the devil and that you are being used by Lucifer. There are going to be people who are going to say that, and that must be hurtful to you. And these maybe even people that you knew in your ward. And I actually want you to just maybe use this opportunity actually to talk to the people in your ward. Tell them how you're doing. Think of the people that just a little over a month ago, you were their bishop. Now you've left. What do you have to say to them?
No, they know. They know I love them. I've sweat and bled with these people, literally,
Okay.
many times. They know I love them. They're hurt right now because of the publicity. If I just stepped down the way I did and walked away, it wouldn't have hurt near as much. Some of the videos I said, they're brainwashed. I actually believe that. The song Follow the Prophet says follow the prophet 54 times in the song.
Wow.
And it's our kids who sing it.
Yeah.
You can't tell me that's not brainwashing, without question. And once you see it, you can't unsee it.
Right.
I've hurt people by saying those kinds of things. I don't regret it. I try not to live with many regrets. I can say sorry. I can say I'm sorry, but you can still not regret it. Hey, I'm sorry that hurts, but I don't regret saying it, because I believe that. And I can't step away from what I believe, but I'm going to, accept the fact that they believe differently and not try to post my will on them. But if I had anything to say to them, it's simply, I love them. They're always welcome in my home. They're always welcome. And we don't have to talk about historicity or DNA in the Book of Mormon or whatever it might be. Yeah. We don't have to go there. We can come here and we can have fun conversations. We can have a blast. Your kids can continue to be friends with my kids, because I can tell you now, when my kids are outside playing with their kids, they didn't talk about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints once.
Exactly.
It never came up. So why can't that continue? I don't know.
Well, it's unfortunately, there's a lot of indoctrination on what anti looks like, right? And anti looks like different. You think differently, you question, it looks, and that's what's sad. And that's what I was trying to say is we didn't become friends because of who you voted for last election. We didn't become friends because you're in my primary class. We became friends because of who you are. And so it shouldn't change. My kids are still the same. It should not change who I am, who you are. We're still the same people. We just believe differently. And I think the more we talk about this and the more people see that there aren't horns that grow out and, we're not out here drinking and doing drugs and cursing every other word, more people see that things have not changed, just the belief, I think it'll normalize it, right?
Yeah.
I don't think there are people that want it to be normalized. I think leadership in any organized religion does not want people to see, wait, you could do this without us, and we're still the same people. But the more internets out there, the more podcasts are out there, the more we talk and have conversations, people see nothing's changed. I'm still the same person.
Yeah.
I still love you.
Yeah, that's right. Love's the answer.
Love's the
Um,
answer.
and I will say this to add to me just telling them love. If you are going to commit your life to something like Mormonism literally has you swear allegiance to in the temple, your entire life, everything you have, your money, your time, your talents, everything to the church. It doesn't say God. It doesn't say give it to God. It says give it to the church, a man-made church. I would say if you're going to do that, do yourself a little bit of grace and look a little deeper than the surface level of what you've been told to look.
Yeah.
You can stay in the church. People do it all the time, but at least know the truth.
Yeah.
At least know the narrative that they're telling is not completely accurate. And then find your reason to stay. That's fine. I know tons of people who know what I know and totally stay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Fine. But just do yourself that favor. And if you would do that, I bet you they would be closer friends to me again. They'd be like, oh, wow,
Absolutely.
I can see what he's saying. And I choose to stay, but I can also now choose to be his friend because I see what he was saying.
Yep,
Right.
yep, that's right. This is not about trying to say, okay, Nick's left, now you've got to leave too. No, it's like, no, Nick's left, let's hear his story and integrate that into your faith walk as well. You know, it's more information, it's more data. Look, I deconstructed my faith. I deconstructed my scriptures. I deconstructed God. So none of this, I'm not afraid because I've already done all of this. Okay. I've been through that and I found a way back into having faith in God again and being a believer and going back to my community to try to teach them things that I've learned on this journey as well. I tell people I left the evangelical village 20 years ago and I come back and it's on fire. And I realize, oh man, these people need Jesus. And I think that's how I approach my community as well, as somebody who's gone through the gauntlet, but is coming back to try to now tell a story, tell my story, but also show how you can have a really deep and abiding faith and know everything that I know and
Yeah.
still believe. I think it's important that people, you know, recognize that as well. Now, I have two final things I want to talk to you about, and then Summur, if you have a final question you have for him too, start thinking of that. One, I just thought, is there anything else that happened over this weekend that you'd like to share with the audience while you're out?
I tasted beer. I tasted a drink somebody made for me. Other than that, my wife and I got tattoos. I wasn't going to do it, but she's wanted them for years. And so she got
Wow.
2 stars that represent her and I, and then the 2 boys on her wrist and the 4 girls on her other wrist. And,
Wow.
you know, she loves it. She's free from so many things that she's wanted to be. And if that's what she wants, heck yeah, I don't care. I want her to be happy. I want her to have some sense of fulfillment because, you know, success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure in life. And we've had success on a number of fronts. We have healthy kids. We have a nice home. We have money in the bank and the ability to have a little freedom.
Mhm.
But we really haven't had that sense of, or at least she hasn't had that sense of fulfillment, right? She's been kind of just on the back burner. The husband's the bishop. He's always up there. He's getting all the attention. He's got all these hours. He's got all these stories to tell. And here's my poor little wife who, oh, there's the guy that came home mad again because of what he just had to do.
Hmm.
And so for me to step back and to watch my wife open up and to go on John Dehlin and to do what she did incredible, by the way. I just
Did
finished watching.
incredible.
She blew my mind how open she was and how she approached this thing. Y'all, and I brought it up. She wouldn't call and order a pizza when we first got married. She was so scared to talk to a perfect stranger. Here she is sitting
Wow.
in a camera that's been viewed by 170,000 people already. And and she was bold and fierce. She wasn't those things in Mormonism. She was working on it, but all of a sudden we've turned this corner in the last 4 weeks, and I'm marveling at the person she's becoming. It's incredible. So if I could tell you anything, that's what I gained over the weekend, watching my wife open up and make friends with perfect strangers. She's never been able to do that.
Okay, so
Wow.
first of all,
Yeah.
I would love to have you and Amanda on the show sometime too down the
Sure.
road where we continue this conversation. I think it's really
I mean, I
important.
want to speak for her, but I'm sure she would. So
Yeah, I'm sure we want to hear Amanda's voice on Mormon Book Reviews as well. So then I guess the final question I actually have for you is, okay, now you've done all this and you've spent your weekend and you did your Mormon Stories thing in Utah. What's next for Nick Jones?
I don't know. I'm not a tech savvy person. I have an iPad right now stacked up on about 8 or 9 books because I don't do this kind of stuff, right? Do I like the attention? Heck yeah. Who doesn't? Most people would lie and say, no, I'm not looking for attention. I wasn't looking for it, but since it's come, it feels good to be heard, to have a voice, to get letter after letter after letter of people saying, you don't know what you've done for me. You can't hear those things and not feed it a little bit and not want to do more of that because you recognize the good it's doing.
Yeah.
So I want to take part in that. I don't know how. The only reason I'm not working right now is because of this podcast. That's why I said to do it today, because I literally, when I leave here, I won't stop until Saturday. I'll work all the way through Saturday because I've got a lot of back work to do because of, but I needed today to just kind of sleep in a little and, do this and then go to work. So I love what I do for a living. I don't want to necessarily change that. I just don't know how I can juggle that plus doing this, but I want to do this. I feel called to this. I don't feel called to my work anymore. It's just work. But this has given me a reason to wake up and say, hey, go do this thing and let people know that they're not alone.
Yeah.
But guys, I have no idea how to launch that. I don't know how to create it. I don't know if I should do a podcast or just do these, like start my own podcast, or if I should, I don't know. Become kind of influencer. What people are saying is we want more of that guy, and so many of the messages, I'm like, I don't know what I did. I don't know how much more information or what I can say that would be more beneficial than what I've already said. But y'all, I've got years of notes and quotes that I've memorized that I just have been able to utilize as a bishop. One of the things that was sad for me as I stepped down was to recognize that I no longer will have a platform to stand and share my feelings. And that's hard, to stand and bear my testimony on a fast and testimony meeting, to share my heart with the people I love. That's been taken from me. Or that maybe not been taken from me. It's been removed on my actions. It wasn't anybody else who took it from me.
Right.
But then I'm given something like this here, or John's podcast, or Rebecca's going to have me on. And it's like, well, I like that because it allows me the same platform in maybe a different nature, but nonetheless, a platform to have a voice for those who don't have one.
Yeah.
And that's why I plan to, start my TikTok and start reading people's stories, because they don't have a voice. If they put it on their TikTok, no one would hear it. But in 4 weeks, I have 20,000 followers on TikTok. I don't even know what that means. I just know it's a lot in 4 weeks.
Yeah.
And so why can't I be their voice?
Right.
Oh, that's fascinating. Yeah.
That's kind of where.
Well, we'll continue talking, Nick. Of course, I literally spent an hour last week with a professor at Brigham Young University helping him launch his podcast. Cool. Giving him a tutorial on how to do it. Again, I help everybody. See, this is the thing. I ain't going. Yeah, I'm going to help this BYU professor launch a faithful podcast. And that's what I do. That's what I do at Mormon Book Reviews. Okay, we talk to everybody, and all the voices are heard. And so we'll continue this conversation. I think this is just the beginning of something. I have a lot of different ideas, Nick, that I think would work for you. And I want to integrate you as maybe as a frequent person who will come on we do panel discussions. I actually want to do a panel discussion. I've already reached out to a handful of people called Can Ex-Mormons and Latter-day Saints Get Along? And I think you might be a good participant for that
Absolutely.
panel discussion. And you will have some very faithful Mormons on that panel discussion. But I think
I'd love
an
I'd love
adult
that.
conversation. Okay, good. So let's figure on you participating in that panel discussion as well. So Summur, as we wrap things up, I just want to say, do you have any final words or a final question that you have for Nick today?
I just have one question for you, Nick, and then I just have something to say. But we've talked about Amanda, and I met her, and I cannot believe she was shy, and because she's amazing, and her energy and her spirit, I mean, she's just I can't speak enough about your wife. So it's amazing to hear that she's just blossomed because that's who I know now, right? I know this Amanda. But how are your kids doing? How have they been able to kind of not just transition LDS wise, but having their dad now like full time, more present than he was before?
I wish they're all out tending to 62 chickens and goats and dogs. They're feeding now.
That's awesome.
But I'd let them speak for me. Dad is fun now.
Wow.
They're like, we want to go hang out with Dad. So I tell you, our thing is we hang around a fire in the backyard and we sing and we laugh and we're present. Dad is present now that he's not a bishop and now that he's not active in the Mormon faith. And but outside of that, they're having their own form of deconstruction. We were very fortunate in the sense that we didn't just pound scripture study into our kids. We were like a lot of Mormon families that now I think will resonate quite well. We would read the Book of Mormon for 3 or 4 nights, and then we'd miss like 3 months,
Right.
go back to it and be like, what chapter were we on? And my son Opie was always like, Alma 19. I'm like, how did you know that? And he's got a great memory. So we go, and sure enough, it was Alma 19, and we picked up where we left off. But we would work our way through the Book of Mormon. I think as a family, we read it twice in
Hmm.
20 years with the kids. I think people need to be more vulnerable with those kinds of things, to say, hey, we don't have it all together. The problem with church across the board, but I would say it's extremely common in Mormonism, is you only see the people when they're putting on their best selves, their best clothes, their best appearance, that everything is so great because God is good and I'm living this thing called the gospel of Jesus Christ. That's what they see. They don't see the behind the scenes, the knockdown, drag out arguments about money or infidelity or whatever might be the thing that these people are dealing with. And even those people who are, they walk into church with their white shirt, their dresses, they sit nicely, they're ready to go, and they're just in form. And that was what was so crazy as a bishop, because you sit on the stand, you'd be like, I know that person's problem, that person, but you'd know about it. And yet you would see them and no one would ever know, because we're not allowed to be vulnerable around our peers in Mormonism. We're not allowed to, which is what I'm trying to be a voice for by outing myself and saying, I'm vulnerable. I'm a man. I have needs. I have problems. I have weakness. And I'm hoping that weakness, as Ether says, can become a strength. But the only way it becomes a strength is by opening up and talking about it.
Yeah.
When we keep things secret or sacred, it's the same damn thing. Maybe not, but it's in Mormon, when they say it's sacred, not secret, it's secret.
Yeah.
Let's call it what it is. That is not healthy. It's not healthy.
Well, I think we had a healthy conversation today. And those of you who are faithful, or those of you who are of X, I kind of probably said a lot of things to a lot of different groups that make them feel uncomfortable today, which is fine. We're all grown-ups here. And I think it's important that we face these realities and the life story that Nick Jones, this is his story. And he was able to tell it on Mormon Stories in depth. And he was able to come on here and give us some more insights about his experiences and what he's been going through since those appearances on Mormon Stories, and what his deconstruction process looks like. I want to thank you so much, Nick, for sharing your story today. I'm really glad we did this today.
Me too. I really enjoyed it.
Summur, I think this was great. This was our first trial, you being
Yes.
my co-host. I want to thank you. I thought you did a bang up job. I know you're there in Disneyland, and I'm sure the kids are just clamoring to go
They're
out there.
ready.
Just so you know, I tell people, so John Dehlin's a Mormon, Sandra Tanner's a Mormon, Summur's a Mormon, Nick Jones, you'll always be Mormons in one sense. We'll always inform you. And so you're doing the most Mormon-y thing or Mormonish thing you could possibly do. You go to Disneyland. And so I want you to
Yep.
have a blast with your family today and have a fun time. And Nick, I hope you have a blast at the fire pit tonight with your family, singing songs and having a joyful life. Thanks again, Summur.
Thank you, guys. Thank you both.
So I just want to hear from you and leave your thoughts in the comments. This was a very compelling conversation. Also want to remind you that for those of you who'd like to financially support the channel, there are links in the description. And I also want to remind you, you can also buy merch at MormonBookReviews.com. You can buy, I just sold 3 t-shirts yesterday. I'm really excited about that. And so check out our merch store. But really, honestly, this is a place where we're going to have these conversations. I'm very grateful that I have this platform. I'm very grateful that last night I was able just to turn on the camera and start throwing some hand grenades out. And it's wonderful to be able to have that platform. Anytime I want, I can just turn on the camera and start talking, and people pay attention. And I think you understand what that's all about, Nick. And remember, the most important thing is this: all the voices of the restoration will be heard here on Mormon Book Reviews.